Hi everybody, I hope you're all doing really well. So today I am back to talk about my September 22 book haul, and most notably, did I read the books that I bought a year ago? This is a concept that I've done for a couple of months now, inspired by Greg over at Supposedly Fun, who every month tracks his previous years of book buying. I think he's done it for about 4 years or so now, basically as a way of keeping himself accountable and also curating his library so it actually reflects what he's interested in and informing his book buying as he goes on. And yeah, basically I've just stolen this concept because even though I have managed to whittle down my TBR, I still want to be very mindful of what I'm buying so that I'm not in a similar situation of having like 60 to 100 books that I haven't read, because often by the time that you actually get around to reading those books that you bought years ago, you've lost interest in them, and I want to make sure that whatever I'm buying is like immediately of interest. And I think looking back on previous purchases and really analysing them is a good step forward. So without much further ado, let's get into those books. So the first book on my September 2022 book haul was Fire and Blood by George R.R. Martin. This was very much inspired by the fact that I was loving House of the Dragon. I got really into that TV series. I'm very, very sad that we're going to have to wait at least another year before season 2 is out. I was shocked at how much I was enjoying the TV series, considering I'd never been a massive Targaryen fan when it came to the original show. I just never had much interest in them, but especially knowing how much George R.R. Martin is inspired by real life history for his stories. The fact that the Dance of Dragons War is inspired by the Anarchy, featuring my very favourite historical figure Empress Matilda. I wanted to read the original text that this show was inspired by. And I will say I've not completed this book, I've read little bits and pieces of it, but for me this wasn't necessarily one that I wanted to read cover to cover, rather one that I wanted to chip away at over time and it to be kind of like a library builder as part of my A Song of Ice and Fire series collection. The next book from my haul was Carrie, Soto is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I'm a massive fan of Taylor Jenkins Reid's books. I think I've at least given a 4-star to pretty much every book that I've read by her, and I think I've read everything. 8 books from her. I think the only thing I have still to read is her little short story, The Evidence of the Affair, which makes me think one of these days I definitely need to do like a Taylor Jenkins Reid ranking video. And so predictably I did read this one, though it was a little while from when I actually bought it to when I read it. I read it in April of this year, but I really loved Carrie Soto. This story about this retired tennis player coming back into the fold after her record for number of titles won is challenged. I think this might actually be my second favourite Taylor Jenkins Reid book. I wasn't sure what I was going to make of this going in because I'd heard quite mixed things, but yeah, I really loved it. Next up is The Marriage Portrait by Maggie, which is her retelling of Lucrezia de Medici, her teenage marriage, and what we presume was murder at the hand of her husband a year later. Maggie O'Farrell taking this story from history and really twisting it round. I know this one was quite a bit of a disappointment to people. I definitely don't think I liked it quite as much as Hamnet. I don't think it stuck with me quite as much, but I did quite like this when I read it. I read this in December 2022, but I think the characters just don't have quite as much staying power for me. Next up is Love on the Brain by Ali Hazelwood. You know I always talk about Ali Hazelwood, and the time that I read this in January 2023, I had just finished my run of Evita and I was just craving a weekend where I got to do nothing, so I sat for 2 days straight just reading books, and this was one of them, and it really contributed to the happy feeling that I had. So yes, this was a read book. Then next up was Ithaca by Claire North. We know that I love Greek myth retelling, and this was one retelling Penelope, Odysseus's wife, and what she was getting up to while Odysseus was away. I had grand plans with this one that I was going to read it straight away, but I actually didn't read it until May of 2023, when I basically just read a bunch of the Greek myth retellings I had left to read, which with hindsight is quite silly because by the time that I did read it, this book was out in paperback and I'd bought the chunky hardback for full price. So I'm kind of slapping myself on the wrist for that. Message to self, don't buy new books if you know that by the time you're going to read them, they're going to be out in paperback. But yeah, I really like this. I definitely want to read the next book in the series, The House of Odysseus, which just came out. Though as we've learnt from this book, maybe I might want to wait until I really want to read it. Next up, this one's a funny one because it's actually a book from my work, so I don't know why I included it on a haul video, to be honest, because I get books from PUP for free, so it's not like I actually bought this one. But I did want to showcase the paperback of Wollstonecraft by Sylvana Tomaselli. This is a book that had been getting some lovely publicity when I first started working there, so I was quite excited that the paperback was coming out. And you know that I love Romantic Outlaws by Charlotte Gordon, which is about the life of Mary Wollstonecraft and Mary Shelley. So yeah, I just wanted to showcase this one. Another book that I picked up was One Christmas Wish by Katherine Rundell, which was this lovely little children's book. I quickly flipped through this one, but then I actually decided that I was going to give this as a gift to my niece. So rather than being part of a book haul for myself, I just gave it to somebody else. Another library builder book was the Picador book of funeral poems. Funnily enough, I ended up picking this book up from W.H. Smith's The Day That the Queen Died. It was actually before we knew that she had passed away. I just kind of saw it in the sale section and thought, you know, that's probably a good thing to have on hand. should the need ever arise to find a suitable poem. And yeah, it just felt very, very spooky that it happened to be that particular day. So not one that I have read cover to cover, but this was never intended to go on my TBR anyway. The next book is another Greek myth retelling, and it's Stone Blind by Natalie Haynes. Once again, another Greek myth retelling that by the time I actually read it, the paperback had come out. Why do I do this to myself? But I did read this again in May of 2023. I really enjoyed it. You can see my review for both this and Medusa by Jessie Burton down below. I think it's just I wanted to support Natalie Haynes. I will read pretty much anything that she writes. I just thought this was a really fantastic retelling of Medusa's life, but also the other gods that come into play, and really emphasising the sheer pettiness of the gods. Book number 10 on this book haul was Burning the Books, which is a history of book censorship by Richard Ovenden. Unfortunately, this was one that I actually did end up just passing on and unhauling as part of my TBR project. I think it's one that one of these days I definitely will want to come back to, but I just knew that my immediate interest was not in this book, so I did pass this on to charity. And then the final book that I picked up for this book haul was this gorgeous edition of Dracula by Bram Stoker. I picked this up in Burford during Burford Literary Festival at this gorgeous little bookshop that is mostly focused around children's books, and I've always been meaning to pick up this edition, and I thought this year will be the year that I buy this and finally read Dracula. I read it for a video where I read 3 different classic vampire stories, so this alongside The Vampire by John Polidori and Carmilla by Sheridan Le Fanu. I think this was my favourite overall, though I did really like Carmilla. To get my full thoughts, do check the video out down below, but I really enjoyed this one. It was so atmospheric, it kind of freaked me out, to be honest. So from that book haul, there were 11 books. I read cover to cover 6 of them. I had 4 books which I wasn't planning on adding to my TBR. They were more the library builder books or books that I gifted to somebody else. And then I ended up unhauling 1 book. So not perfect in terms of like buying something and immediately reading it, but also I do see the reasoning for some of the other books that I didn't immediately read cover to cover. Sometimes you just want to have a book of funeral poems to have on hand. Do let me know if you've read any of the books that I've spoken about today. Let me know your thoughts on them. I would love to hear from you. I hope you're having a fantastic day, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks. Bye.